Hello. Oh, we're good. Oh, we're good. Yeah, it's Sunday afternoon. Um, just wanted to do a couple of videos really, and I wanted to. I was conscious this one might end up being a two-parter, just because we're going to be talking about quite a few different things here, but it's very relevant. I want to thank a friend of mine who we kind of mentioned this stuff to him on Friday, and he was yeah, it's quite interesting to hear what he had to say about it. I had a bit of a laugh this morning because it's very funny. Some of the stuff you get recommended to you on the alternative media on YouTube. It's interesting what people think you would watch. There's just be careful out there. There's a lot of grifters about. Um, I can't do that Cockney accent. I can't. Without convincing as Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins. Right. So, all right. So let's get back to work. The thing that really got me, there's a few things to this conversation really about what I call the mental health racket, deliberate misspelling, is the thing that triggered it though was a friend of mine. I've not seen her for a bit. I must go and say hi over Christmas or something. But she was saying to me a few years ago. I'm not going to mention. I'm going to say even her first name for obvious reasons. Back when she was younger, when she was a bit younger, she'd had a bit of a breakdown. We'll call it that. She'd had more on her plate than she had resources to deal with it, whether they were internal resources or external. But she didn't have the resources to cope with what life had thrown at her, and she had a bit of a collapse, a bit of a mental health collapse. We'll call it that, and needed quite a bit of care and quite a bit of sort of looking after and a bit of kid gloves and keeping an eye on for a little while until such time as we knew that everything was okay again. And it's awful. It's awful when that happens to anybody. And the problem was in the here and the now. So we look at that 15 years later on. Is that unfortunately she got into the system and she'd become labelled as somebody who had those kind of problems, and that system would not leave her alone anymore. It was still bothering her even now. She does not need that kind of help or support. Did not need it. And I wonder how often this actually happens. Do you get people who once needed that kind of help? They might have had some sort of episode in their lives where they collapsed and broke down, and they actually recovered, and they didn't want to be that person anymore. They didn't want to be Mr. or Mrs. Breakdown for the rest of their life. They didn't want to be defined by that one experience. They wanted to move on from it, and they wanted to come back stronger, which I think is a far more positive and life-affirming thing. But they were almost prevented from doing so by people who decided they were going to look after them, whether they liked it or not. I suppose there were jobs at stake. And it got me thinking more about the wider subject of mental health, because I've got a little bit of history in that department, but I won't bore you with it or burden you with it. And that's part of the problem is people don't want to burden their friends with this kind of thing, do they? But it does seem to me that we've tried to reject a certain extreme view of things for a long time ago, and we've picked the wrong replacement, if you will. So if you remember back in the day, the idea of anybody, and I would say this was until about 15, 20 years ago, the idea of anybody having a mental health issue would be met with scorn, derision. There'd be people telling them they needed to man up and get over it, so they'd be called a loony or a nutter, or or there'd be question marks about, that they were a flake, they were weak, that they were unreliable in some way. And you might get a bit of dispensation, for like a tragic life event or something like that. But if if life had just got on top of you for some reason and you were struggling, no, absolutely, there was a very, very kind of hostile attitude towards that kind of thing, and it can be rather nasty, rather cruel, in the way that it manifested itself. And so, really the challenge, I think, for us all socially was to just look at that again, think about, what might have contributed to a person getting in that state in the first place. Perhaps in their lives they've never been able to build up the internal resources so they could cope with stresses and pressure. That maybe it wasn't their fault. Maybe that was the challenge for helpful support if you want to do some good. And that's the key thing, of doing some good. I'll tell you, we'll come to that in a second. And how do we help that person so that they can, they can be a bit more, maybe they can be a bit more resilient or a bit more robust in life, but they can have the confidence to tackle life on life's terms and not be that person again, and not have that kind of, something truly awful happens to them. That's a completely different thing. And people they need to sort of deal with tragic life events in whatever way. But really, it was, we needed to modify the way that we thought about this, and maybe look to do some good rather than, really, really quite horrible people using the pain and misery of others to feel good about themselves. Well, what have we done instead? Well, we've actually picked a different group of people, using those people to feel good about themselves, because the stigmatization of mental health hasn't actually stopped. It just manifests itself in a completely different way now. I don't think there's many things in life that are more humiliating than the thought of people feeling sorry for you on a big scale. I think if you've got any self-respect, then the last thing in the world you'd want is people feeling sorry for you, constantly feeling sorry for you. Maybe if you have had a kind of horrible thing happen in your life, people will, but you wouldn't want it on an ongoing basis. And I can't imagine many things more humiliating. So that, on the basis of what we've done with mental health, we've sort of democratized it. And we've had this kind of thing where we're encouraged, if somebody is, say they're depressed or whatever, to feel sorry for them. And I think one of the most worrying things for me has been this thing about, we're all struggling in that area to some extent. Well, look, if everybody's got mental health problems, and nobody has because it's now normal. It's not about normalizing it at all, because some people have got difficulties that you haven't got, and maybe might need support in the short term that you don't. The key thing is that support is temporary, and it's about getting the person back to a place of self-reliance. But you've got people throwing words into conversations now, like I'm depressed. You mean like what? You mean like you've got brain fog and you feel like crap and you're constantly tired and you can't concentrate on anything and life's an enormous struggle and sometimes you have suicidal thoughts? Oh no, you're just having a bad day. Well, that's not being depressed. That's having a bad day. It's not the same thing. You have me worried there for a second, but we've got people throwing words like depression around very casually. It's a little bit like people throwing the word racist around, like the way they do now. It's lost all its meaning. If you throw a word around like confetti, it trivializes the word. And when people say they're depressed now, I wonder what do you actually mean? If you've ever had real depression, I know I have, and I know lots of people who have had it. It's a hellish thing to live with. It's a hellish thing to live with. The intrusive nature of it, the way it makes you feel on the inside, the way that you just can't think straight, you can't do things that logically should be easy for you, etc. So please don't trivialize that word. But one of the other things about this is that mental health has become a sort of get out of jail free card for people who get caught with their pants down. They might literally get caught with their pants down, or they might get caught with their fingers in the till, or doing something they shouldn't be doing, and they put up mental health as part of their defence. And you can see why somebody might do this, but this isn't free. This comes at an enormous price down the line, because unfortunately, as my friend explained to me, once you've had that mental health label attached to you, you're never getting left alone. It's very, very hard for you to shake that label off. Once you are identified as a person with mental health problems, then it is basically impossible to shake that label off. And try getting yourself out of the system, try getting yourself unlabeled. I know somebody several years ago who was going through an absolutely horrendous period in their lives, and I asked her, I said, have you not spoken to somebody? Have you not gone and got some professional help? And she said to me, the thing is, Daz, I don't want to get into the system. Because I know once I'm in, I'll never get out. And that's the problem. And so all I think we've done really is we've totally trivialized the conversation, and we have replaced one form of cruelty, sort of one form of humiliation, in the form of cruelty towards people who are struggling, with another form in the form of this kind of performative pity. And I think we do know deep down that that's the case, but I think that makes people feel better about themselves. I suppose it's nicer, in quotes, to feel sorry for them than horrible to them. Of course, the really hard work is doing neither of those things and actually doing good and helping people to help themselves. But the thing is as well that once you've got labelled as somebody who has those kind of problems, that's very convenient for anybody who wants to silence you, anybody who wants to prevent you from having an opinion on anything, or shut you down and make sure that you can't contribute anything to the conversation. If you've got that kind of past, then every time you dare to say anything or dare to think anything of your own, then people who have their own game here can turn around and go, yeah, but you can't listen to him or her, they're crazy. The other thing is that if it was a legal matter, then okay, you might get treated more leniently if you put up mental health as a thing in mitigation. You might even get off scot-free. They might let it go, but my God, you become a kind of asset. I do know there's something called a change agent, and I wonder, to what extent, genuinely quite messed up people are used as change agents, and also people who have decided that they're going to be that's the label they've appropriated themselves. The other horrendous thing here is the financial side of it and the monetary element of the mental health industry. But I think what I'll do is I will hit the pause button on this. I'll have a quick cup of tea, and then we'll do part 2 just while it's fresh and on the brain. All right, see you soon.